Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Testing, Scope, Scoring, and Diagnostics. Hopefully, you've seen the other presentation about constructs and test format, which gives an overview of the kind of skill areas, uh, knowledge, and skills that are measured with the tests that we construct. And it also shows how we construct the measurement scales. In this presentation, I want to add more details about how we use these tests with our students at our school. Okay, so monthly tests. 月考. There are two different ways of testing, two different systems in Taiwanese elementary schools. Some use two tests per semester, midterm and final. Our school uses three tests per semester. And they're not strictly monthly tests. When you fit three tests into a semester, it's actually every 6 to 7 weeks there's a test, but they're still called monthly tests. Now, the English textbooks in Taiwan usually have 5 units. Units 1, 2, 3, 4. In between, there are review units. So it's 1, 2 plus a review 1, 3, 4, a review 2. And then finally, a fifth unit would be culture. This could be something like a holiday, Halloween, Christmas, Mother's Day, or it could be some element of another country, foreign country, some element of their culture which is different to Taiwanese culture. So it appears in the textbook just to give the kids some kind of international perspective. So the thing is, for test three, there's not a lot of content because it's only 1 unit. And so we retest the difficult items that appeared in the previous units. So that gives us different scopes here. You can see the scopes down at the bottom. Test one is only units 1, 2. Test 2, units 3, 4. Finally, test 3 will be cumulative. So it'll cover all the material in the book the whole semester, plus some culture. Okay, the reported scores. So you may remember from the other presentation that these tests have different numbers of items. The multiple choice questions, MCQs, which are reading and listening, they have 30 items, 1 point each, so that creates 30 points. The writing test has only 10 questions at 2 points each, and the speaking test has 5 questions at 4 points each. Likert scale from 0 to 4. And this gives us leeway in scoring. But at the same time, they have different point scales if you look at the raw points. So teachers can report raw points on the test forms when they give them back to the students, or they can report percent, proportion correct. I prefer the percent or proportion correct. And the reason why is this. If you look in the orange box at the top, this is a screenshot from a test paper, and it says writing, reading, listening, speaking, average. So we can take all the tests and average their scores, and that would be their test score for that assessment. Assessment 1, Assessment 2, or Assessment 3 that occurs during the semester. And what happens is you can actually see, you can get a general idea of the types of students you have. Typically, when they're very young, they do much better at the communication tests, the listening and speaking, and these scores will be higher than the literacy tests, reading and writing. However, as they get older, these should even out. In the best case, in our outstanding students, they all become approximately equal. However, some students graduate, we matriculate students where they are still stronger at communication and weaker at literacy. And occasionally, we will see students who are much better at the MCQ questions, the 30-point scale questions. reading, and listening. And they are weaker at writing and speaking. Writing and speaking are productive language skills. You need to produce a language, you need to produce output. And this is a different mental process. It's cognitively more challenging for people to accomplish writing and speaking, whereas reading and listening is relatively easy. You choose the correct answer. And as you know, a student with absolutely no knowledge on a three option test might get 33% just at random. So there's always this bottom threshold of lucky guessing. And that's why when you construct the multiple choice tests, you need to have options that look familiar to the students, and they're able to demonstrate that they have some true knowledge, that they're able to distinguish between the true answer and answers that just look like they've seen them before in the textbook. Okay. Um, so you'll see these different types of students, and that's why these scales are bouncing up and down. It will be a different profile for the different types of students. And you can see the brackets here at the bottom. What we have here is reading and writing together create the literacy exam. Listening and speaking together create the communication exam. Now let's take a look at these subscales. So here we have them again. You remember from the other presentation that the constructs of the test are vocabulary knowledge, comprehension of details, which is a combination of skill and knowledge, and inference, which of course is also a combination of skill and knowledge, being able to apply their personal experience, world knowledge, life experience to infer something which is not directly stated. Okay, so you can see that now these scales are repeated. So under vocabulary, it could be listening vocabulary and reading vocabulary power. Comprehension of detail, again, listening and reading. Inference, listening and reading. So now we have these 6 scales. But look, we also have literacy tests and communication tests. Once we bracket the writing and the reading together, this shows us their strength in literacy, being able to learn from books, being able to read, to have the concentration power to read foreign language text. English is a foreign language to them, to these students. Sometimes it's not that easy, especially when you have pages of text. And as they get older, there are fewer pictures and more text. Okay, and a communication exam. When you put speaking and listening together, this gives us a scale of their ability to produce comprehensible sentences, comprehensible utterances, either in writing or their pronunciation and grammar is good enough so that they are comprehensible when they talk to you, when they talk to the teacher on the exam. Okay, and now, number 5. Look what we can do now. These are cognitive processes: recall and recognition. If you put writing and speaking together, remember, these are the productive language skills you must produce. You must remember the words that you want to say. You must remember what order to put them in so that they make sense when you say them or write them. This is a heavy cognitive burden for young children. It gets easier as they get older. At least that's what we expect. I mean, if your teaching is effective, this is what you would expect, that it would get better as they get older. If you put reading and listening together, remember these are multiple choice questions where you just select the best answer. So this is recognition. It's a weaker thinking power. Um, some students, might get lucky. They kind of feel like it's the right answer and they get lucky. That means there's a little bit of knowledge there. Some students, some questions, maybe they have no feeling whatsoever. Well, then that's just random guessing. But ideally, on a good MCQ test, multiple choice question test, they will have enough knowledge to be able to see that one option is correct while the others are clearly not correct. But you see, they don't actually have to recall it because the answer is given to them, it's presented in front of them. So, this is a skill of recognition. It's a easier thinking process. And now we have 10 scales. What do we do with those 10 scales? Well, that's a lot of information to give to a child and also to their parents. And what I realized was probably we should turn these 10 scales into the axes of a radar chart because kids have experienced gaming, even their parents now, this generation, their parents grew up on online games already, so they're all familiar with the strength characteristics of these characters when they play their games, and it's usually presented in a radar chart. So very intuitive, very easy to understand. And let's take a look at test one. This came from one year, let's see, it was last year in the first semester. And we have an outstanding and a struggling student. And now we can see a profile. And if you look at this graph, this graphic here, you'll see that the average of the class, there are 12 students in the class, and that's the reddish orange line, the thick line. The individual student is the blue line. And if we see Kelly, and this year she was a fifth grader, if we see Kelly, we see that she is outstanding. She is above average in every skill area, every construct. So her line is larger or outside of the class line. If you look at our struggling student, Jeff, you can see the average is there. The orange line is still the same because they're in the same class. And you can see that Jeff's blue line, his test scores, his measurements are inside of the orange red line. That means he is weaker. And we can see what area precisely he is very weak at. And we can see that this relates to literacy. He does have strong points. We can see these strong points where he is equal to the other students. And these strong points are vocabulary knowledge. So we know that this boy, Jeff, his technique, his style, what he's able to do is memorize words. He's not that good at thinking. With inference, not that good at thinking, being able to comprehend certain details. He needs help there. He needs a lot more practice. Now, remember that we have 3 tests per semester, so we can do this again at test 2. At test 2, we can see Kelly and Jeff, and we can see now the colors have changed. Now, watch out, the colors have changed. So the blue line now becomes test 1, and the red orange line becomes test 2, and we can see a comparison. We can see growth, or we can see negative growth. And in this case, Kelly has just a little bit of growth at some points. Um, and she dropped down a little bit on some points. But the difference is only one on a 10-point scale. And remember how with multiple choice tests, maybe students get lucky. Um, it also works in reverse. If a student is very good, but they miss a question, that also could be bad luck. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't know. Kind of suggests that they don't know that, but we're not so sure. That's why we always have 10 questions to measure a construct. All right. If you have only one question to measure a construct, you really don't know what's going on. So we put 10 for each of these constructs, and we can say that she's still doing okay. And we don't have to worry about this little dip here, a 1 point dip. We don't really have to worry about it. She increased by 1 point on a few of these axes. That's okay too. That's great. Let's take a look at Jeff. Jeff did increase. This is what we like to see. Jeff made progress on a few of these axes. One of these axes, he kind of bombed a little bit. He needs a lot of help there in that area. So we'll also see this. An outstanding student usually has this full circle or near full circle that just gets dented a little bit on some of these axes. A struggling student will have these points, will have these strange shapes. And we always try to look for certain points where they're sharp and pointy, and at least we know that in some areas they are still excelling, they're okay, they have a foothold, they have a chance. If a student is small, if their area is so small inside of the class average on every axis, then that student is really struggling and needs serious help. But so far, Jeff made some progress, so we're happy. Let's move on to test three. Okay, test three, you'll see that there's not much change in Kelly. Um, and again, we have the blue line being the test one and the red orange line being test three. So now we're comparing the beginning of the semester and the end of the semester. And what we see, Kelly's a little bit tired and her effort is dropping off, and she loses a point on many of these axes. But that's okay. Like I said, as long as the circle is still kind of full, because she's consistent all the time on test one, two, and three, we're still not that worried. Jeff, on the other hand, he fluctuates. He also dropped a little bit between test two and three. If we flip back, test two, test three, test two, test three. Okay, so he did make progress on some of these axes compared to the beginning of the semester, but compared to test two, he dropped a little bit. This is normal though, because people tend to get tired at the end of the semester. They're thinking about vacation and they get careless on the test. It's okay. There are other people who have a different pattern though. Sometimes we see a pattern where they are in a trough at test two. They really bomb on test two, but then they realize that they're bombing. So on test three, they pick it up and they come back swinging. So you'll find out that different students have different types of tendencies, they have different trajectories. And when we collect data over a whole semester for every individual student, we can start to learn their patterns and we can see where they are strong and where they need help. Okay, so let's just cut to the chase what the data says. You can't really see these 4 points in these examples that I showed you. These 1, 2, 3, 4 points are a generalization, a summary of what we have seen in Hot Spring Elementary School for several years. Remember, every year, every semester has 3 tests. So that's actually 6 tests per year, per child. And after all these years, what the data says. Number one, literacy skills represent the greatest challenge for students. And if you want to learn more, you can take a look at my English stuff and look at the pages devoted to reading. Um, After years of testing and working with the students, We realized that for elementary school students, actually literacy is key. Um, Now, a lot of the official policy for foreign teachers, like myself, foreign teachers in elementary schools, the official policy is to work on communication, listening, and speaking. But the data tells us otherwise, that really the challenge is literacy. Number two, in literacy, then, reading is more challenging than listening or speaking. So we do want to focus on reading. Reading is very important. They're going to need reading as they're going to need literacy skills as they advance through junior high, senior high, and university. Remember that there will be English classes required, mandatory English classes following these children all the way as they grow up and enter university. There will always be mandatory English. And we want to have them better prepared. We want to help them for their future. And it turns out that we should be focusing on reading. Okay, so item three, the comprehension questions that require analysis are the most challenging. Um, You haven't seen that much detail in this presentation, but in the future, I will show you even more details about the types of questions. You may have seen in the other presentation a comprehension question where the information is easily extractable. You can even skim and scan. Kids learn how to skim and scan text and they can find the answer to who, what, when, where, why. Those questions are actually kind of easy. The next most difficult is the inference, but the most difficult question are comprehension questions. The answer is in front of them in black and white, but they have to do some steps of analysis. It may be a more complex question, or a more complex reading, or reading a graphic, or reading a bar chart. So let's say a bar chart, for example, and if you look at individual bars, that's extractable information. The number of people who like juice, the number of students who like milk. Imagine a bar chart where students have to look at this bar chart and answer reading questions. But there may be a kind of analysis question where you would ask how many students are in the class. Okay, well, the answer is right in front of them. They just add up the numbers for all the bars. But you see, it's kind of a multi step. There is some analysis involved, some sort of problem solving, but it's not inference. It requires solving a problem. That question is the most challenging. And understanding inference is easier than analysis. What we find out is as the students get older, even up to sixth grade, their inference ability becomes um, really well developed and they can score very high on inference questions, but they will still have difficulty on comprehending details where some sort of analysis is involved. Okay, well, that's it. I wanted to make this presentation nice and short, so that's it. If you want to know a little bit more about reading, and you can find some of the reading resources, some of the stuff that we use to teach reading, you can check out the English Stuff. Here's a QR code that takes you to the main page of English Stuff. Once you get into the English Stuff website, or Google site, sorry, it's a Google site, um, look for online and gamified learning and look at gamified reading. There's also a sub-page called Reading A to Z. If you're not familiar with Reading A to Z, I recommend you check it out. We do not have any relationship with them. We use this reading platform at our school, and we are just happy customers. I think it's a good idea. I think many teachers in Taidong County and even the Bureau of Education in Taidong think that Reading A to Z is a good platform. And we have used it. And on that page, you can read about our experiences using Reading A to Z. And that's it. So that's it for now. And thank you for listening. Good luck and good teaching.